If you want to make a difference and leave a legacy, I would tell you to find a mentor and seek knowledge. Then turn around, find someone else who needs a mentor, and continue to pass the torch. All right, we are on another episode of Pass the Torch podcast. Today we have Hamza Khan, the multi-award-winning marketer and entrepreneur, author of The Burnout Gamble, co-founder of Splash Effect Canada, Skills Camp, and also one of my favorite things, he was a TEDx and a keynote speaker. Phenomenal. Hamza, thank you so much for being on Pass the Torch podcast. Welcome.
Levante, this is an honor, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. One of the first things we always talk about whenever we have a guest is what was their why that got them into doing what they're doing with their passion. And you have a lot of passions and you're doing a lot of cool things. What started you on that path?
I love it. I feel like you've been reading some Simon Sinek over there, starting with why. My why is really interesting because I think that any good business, a founder, a co-founder should really try to solve their own problem. And a lot of entrepreneurs come to me and they ask for advice. They say, I want to start a business. And my question to them is always, okay, what's a pain point in your life? Solve that pain point. Solve a pain point in your own life. And chances are on a planet of 7 billion people, somebody else has that exact same problem and they're going to pay for it. So my problem was I spent 3 years of my undergrad dragging my feet through a program that I didn't really enjoy, and I only did it because I felt like that was the right thing to do. Yeah. There was a blueprint laid out for me by my father, by society, that told me I should fall into the career trinity of doctor, lawyer, engineer. But I had other inclinations. I was creatively inclined. I enjoyed photography, videography, graphic design, web design. And long story short, it wasn't until the end of my third year that I discovered a poster. A really well-designed poster. I'll never forget it. I mean, just immaculate use of white space and typography, and it just really spoke to me. It made me stop for a fraction of a millisecond longer than I normally would have. And it caught my attention and it convinced me to go to a leadership development workshop that totally changed the path of my personal, professional, and academic life. Mm-hmm. And that's how I ended up in the career that I am today, one step after another. But I think about that moment all the time as my why. I want to help a younger version of me see that poster much sooner. I don't want a younger version of me to drag their feet through 3 years of education and dissatisfaction and just wander through life without having that moment. So I try to do that through my work. And it's not posters anymore. It's sometimes posters, but it's mostly videos, it's marketing campaigns, it's digital ads, it's augmented reality. It's all these ways that I can earn the attention of people who want to make critical decisions in their life. And so through Splash Effect, I'm able to do that. I show up every single day and I help colleges and universities and government organizations, nonprofits, healthcare organizations, reach people at moments of transition much quicker and with a lot more ease, if you will. So that's my why. My why is helping people transform ideas into reality, but doing that through the power of marketing.
That's amazing. Tell us about your latest project that you're working on right now.
Yeah, so as you mentioned, I'm a recently published author. So The Burnout Gamble came out just a couple of weeks ago. This has been a labor of love, man. For the last 2 years, I've been pouring my heart and my soul into this. It's my first book. It's very scary to have it out into the world, but people are receiving it, all around the world. I'm seeing people as far as Japan and Australia and South Africa tweeting me pictures and sending me things on Instagram. Like, they're reading this book and it's changing their life. And so that's such an honor for me. I wrote this book because I struggled with occupational burnout for most of my career. Mm-hmm. I had a pretty graphic episode of occupational burnout when I was an intern a couple of years ago, and then again when I was heading up a marketing department at one of Canada's largest universities. And so between those two experiences, I learned that if I had one more experience like that, to be honest, Levante, I don't know if I would have made it in one piece. I was very lucky to have my health intact after those two instances.
Yeah.
But I realized in learning about burnout that stress is the underlying problem, and all of us, myself and yourself included, even now, don't have the best relationship with stress. And as entrepreneurs, as go-getters, people listening to this podcast, I mean, the very fact that you're listening to a mentorship podcast that tells me that you're doing a lot of things right in your life. You're reading, you're listening, you're focused, you're ambitious, and that comes with a hefty price tag. And that price tag, if you're not careful, is your health and your wellness. So I wrote this book very much as an antidote for people who want to avoid burning out, and as a recovery process for people who are going through it. So that's what's been exciting in my life recently.
First of all, I don't know too many people who, personally, especially, who've written books, and it's amazing that you've already written a book. And that's huge, absolutely huge what you're talking about. It's insane. So my wife is German. We talk about this all the time, and the difference, especially between the culture in Europe and the culture in the United States for vacationing alone, and how
Huge.
you need to take breaks every once in a while. And we brag like we're so busy. Oh my gosh, I have so much stuff to do, and
So much to do, the glorification of busy. It's funny you say
yeah.
Europe. I just got back from Eastern Europe, so I'm going on a lot of like sort of press engagements. I'm doing interviews and speaking engagements to promote this book. And so the first place I went to was Eastern Europe.
Yeah.
There was a company that brought me out there to go to Bulgaria, Romania, Serbia, and Greece. And I'm not even kidding you, the culture shock, just in the way that they perceive burnout as a concept. That added another level of stress for me to talk about, flirting with burnout, ironically, while talking about burnout. But I had to convince some people that burnout was a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the way that some people, especially in Eastern Europe, were perceiving what I was saying, they were like, how can you burn out by sitting in front of a computer for 10 to 12 hours?
Right.
They thought it was just weakness. And to a certain extent, they're right. But that doesn't make it any less significant. That doesn't make it any less, impactful on the people. Only the person wearing the shoe knows how hard it pinches.
So someone who's living out their passion, and they're doing it daily, are they still susceptible of burnout, or is this something that you're working a job and you realize this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life, and they're more susceptible, or is it a combination of the two?
That's interesting that you asked that. So there's a spectrum, and I would imagine, I would encourage you to imagine a bell curve. Mm-hmm. And on the far left, just imagine on that axis, you have the level of challenge and difficulty. Now, if there's not enough challenge or difficulty, you experience what's known as underwhelmed burnout, which is you're not being challenged enough, you're not motivated enough, you're not passionate enough, and as a result, you're burning out through sheer attrition. On the other end of the spectrum is too much challenge, too much effort, too much passion, and that's the occupational burnout that we know, that I've become familiar with, which is you throw yourself at something. Somebody once told me a quote. I say it like it was a long time ago. It was actually earlier this year. They said, find something you love and then let it kill you. And dude, Levante, I took that home and I thought about it for like days and weeks. I'm like, you know what? You look around and there's people who are just subscribing to that. They found something that they love. They found their passion. You and I feel like, I feel like even though we're miles away, I can feel it through the screen. You love what you do.
Absolutely.
But I can tell that you give it your all, man. Like here you are. This is, I think, your second podcast recording of the day. So I'm sure you also balance multiple other commitments. You're married. And so even doing what you love can literally kill you if you're not careful. So there is some truth to what that person said to me. People who are passionate, who are intensely passionate about what they do, tend to work harder. They feel like they have something to prove, and they give into it.
Absolutely. I'm thinking. I'm trying to remember the name. I was watching a documentary again on Netflix, of course, and it was talking about how in Japan they literally work themselves to death. It's called karoshi.
Ooh. Dude, that is frightening that you say that. I talked about this in the book, and I'm hoping either next year or shortly after I get a chance to go to Japan, because I cite it quite a bit in the book. Mm-hmm. And I encourage any government, any organization, anyone to just look at the worst manifestation of burnout. Yeah. Look to Japan, and it's absurd because from what I've learned, you're going to laugh at this. In meetings, it's actually acceptable. In fact, it's encouraged for you to be tired. It's perfectly normal for you to sit in on a Monday morning meeting and do this. I'm not even kidding. Hand on your face and snore. That's culturally acceptable in Japan because that's a sign that you're working really hard. Wow, people are sleeping at work. The levels of loneliness are at epidemic levels over there. You have things like cuddle cafes, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a place where you go to a cafe and you pay for somebody to cuddle you.
That's insane.
So we're just seeing the worst manifestations of burnout happening in Japan. And it's a cautionary tale. It should be for everyone. And literally, like you said, karoshi, death at work, death by overwork. It's happening in Japan, in China, in Korea. That region of the world is experiencing some things that I really hope that governments, individuals, and organizations can come together and solve as soon as possible to prevent unnecessary loss of life.
No, it's huge, and especially being able to see it and it exists, and understanding that we're on that path, whether it's in the United States, whether it's in Canada, wherever on the globe, and say that's an example. We can either fall into that same destructive pattern, or we can fix it now.
Totally.
I'm really curious about the title, the burnout gamble. What does the gamble part come from?
That's a great question. So when I realized that I was predisposed to burnout, that I was going to burn out no matter what, I had to ask myself, in learning about burnout, what could I do to reduce the odds that I would burn out? Because I had to accept a couple of premises. The first one was that success requires effort. That the one thing that wasn't going to change in my life is that I wanted something. I wanted success, however I chose to define it. So I wasn't willing to sacrifice that. I had to accept that in pursuit of these things, that I was going to have to induce effort. Now, the other premise is that effort always induces stress. So whenever you exert effort, just by definition, you exert stress. It's just the laws of the universe, whether it's walking, getting up and resisting the forces of gravity, or going up against a boss, or trying to start a new business, embarking on a new relationship. So if those two things are true, that you're going to pursue success and success is going to require effort, then you have to control the frequency of two things, or actually control two variables rather. Burnout happens when you are experiencing a high frequency of stress and when the impact of stress on your life is too high. And when both of those things are true, when there's too much stress in your life and when you're not able to withstand the force of stress, that's how you burn out. So I had to ask myself, what could I do in my daily life, day in and day out, to control the frequency of stress and reduce the impact of stress? Yeah. And so, like any good gambler, I applied a risk assessment framework to it, and I said, judging by where my life is right now, there's too much stress, and I don't have the resilience necessary to cope with it, which is why I'm always at extreme likelihood of burning out. Wow. And so over time, over the last couple of years, I've found ways to reduce the frequency of stress and to also diminish the impact of it on me. So that's the burnout gamble, and I want to present it to any readers as such, that you are gambling with your health, your wellness, and your long-term success if you're not careful. Every day, waking up, getting out of bed, and going to work is a gamble.
Wow, that makes perfect sense. Throwing science in there too, so this is something that
pseudoscience, man. I tried to consult as many professionals as possible. I'm just a guy who burned out, man.
It's real.
I'm definitely not a doctor. Yeah,
it's real, and people don't realize it until they're either witnessing it firsthand through somebody else, or they're the participant in that burnout. And I can tell you, I've definitely experienced either on the precipice of it, or probably just very luckily went through it and didn't even realize it at that point. Like, okay.
Well, let me ask you this, man. Have you ever neglected your sleep? Have you ever neglected meals and working out to go and work? Absolutely. So, dude, you've, just by definition of that, you've experienced some degree of burnout.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Because burnout is a cycle. I think that everyone just looks to the most extreme examples of burnout and says that's what burnout looks like. But the truth is, so many of us are experiencing micro burn. Yeah. If that's the thing, yeah.
I was thinking, have I ever passed out? But like that, again, that's the extreme spectrum of burnout. So
yeah,
this is something I'm gonna make sure, like my team, Mentorch, Pass the Torch podcast is a podcast I do on my own with my wife, but Mentorch, it's a tech company, and a lot of these guys right now, we're a remote team, and they're working full-time jobs in addition to what we're doing here. So
it's a very 21st century business that you've got running, and it's challenging to run it because there is some wisdom to having a physical workplace where you can have a 9-to-5 workday and implement some of the structure that our parents might have been used to. But in 2017, total remote workforce, working around the clock, things like unlimited vacation, you have to be careful because work expands so as to fill the time allocated for its completion. I think that's Parkinson's law. Work expands so as to fill the time allocated for its completion. Mm-hmm. So if you're not careful about the different limits in your life, if you're not defining what's enough, that is asking for a frequency of burnout to creep into your life, and if you're not prepared, that stress can wear you out.
Well, absolutely. I'm buying the book myself. I'm gonna make sure
Oh man,
my brother's getting the book. Heck, my team's getting the book. We're gonna make sure this
man.
definitely in my sphere something that is 100% needed to be read. And I'm in the military as well. I'm gonna make sure that I'm letting them know, hey, this is the burnout gamble. It's very real, especially in the military. I don't know if you've seen or heard about the ships that are colliding. Like your book addresses that.
And thank you so much, man. I mean, that means a lot to me. That's more than I can ask for over here. And I think about the military a lot. So, are you a reservist or are you full time?
Full time.
What's your configuration?
Full
You're
time.
full time in the
Yeah.
military. Yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. Oh, so wait, you're doing this business while you're stationed and
Yeah, at night.
oh my God,
Yeah,
dude.
don't tell anybody. I might get in trouble.
I have the utmost respect for that. That talk about like the side hustle, man. That's just based on what I've seen about you and the way that you conduct yourself online and everything. I would have guessed that this was your full time thing. So that's really awesome, man. I'm in awe. I was a reservist here in the Canadian Armed Forces for about 5 or 6 years. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. As soon as I could enlist, I think the day after I went and I enlisted. And one of the most rewarding experiences of my life, and I think about it often. I think about what would have happened if I stayed the course and didn't just. I have to make a tough choice. It's either I continue with this full time or I pursue this marketing thing. And not a day goes by where I think to myself, what would happen if I went full time with it? And I imagine I would be doing something very similar to you right now. So yeah, you're right, man. Because the military, human services, nurses, doctors, anybody who's responsible for other human beings, and especially people who work in reactive work, they're the most susceptible to burnout. Dude, I mean, talk about being armed and ready and vigilant all the time, right?
Yeah,
that's maintaining a level of productive anxiety and stress, baseline stress that's higher than anyone else. Because you have to be ready to just completely shift gears and get into battle mode on the drop of a dime.
Oh my gosh, I cannot wait to read your book. I get really. I'm a book nerd. I get really excited. The message is so important, and it absolutely speaks close to my heart. And I definitely go by the rule: be careful what you're reading. Like, be very picky about what you read because you only have a certain amount of hours in the day. Just like you said, like we're both really, really busy. Your book is going to make it to the top of my list, and I can't wait to talk to you about it after as well. But yeah, I'm super excited.
I'm honored, man. Dude, you're gonna make me cry. That's that's really awesome to hear, man. It would be an absolute honor to have you and your brothers, both biological and in the forces read this. So.
It's selfish too because I can say I know an author. Like I can be like, I know Hamza. Yeah, I know. I talked to him on my podcast. Yeah, he wrote this book. Okay. No, it's cool. Absolutely. So, a TEDx speaker. Did you talk about burnout in the TEDx talk, or was it a different subject? How is that?
Right. So the first, I've been very fortunate to have done 2 TEDx talks back to back. So the first one, within the span of a year, I did 2, and I got the offer to do both around the same time, which is why there wasn't a conflict.
Yeah.
So the first one, I talked about the difference between leadership versus management, and I talked about how in the 21st century, young guys and just young people in general, the way that we're running our businesses typically is different from the way that businesses were run in the past, and that applying the previous styles of management, which is very sort of, cut and dry and rigid and structured. And it assumes that workers are lazy and dishonest. And, I think let's throw that out the window and respect and understand the way that we work and our behaviors and expectations. So I talked about the differences between leadership and management. And it was really well received. I mean, it also pissed a lot of people off because rightfully so, the criticism was that it's not just young people who adopt this as a way of thinking, but I generalized a little bit. Of course, I took some liberties with the presentation and who I was speaking to. It was for a university I was working at.
Yeah.
But I understand that it's a mindset that you have people our age who are, very, very good and effective managers and people who are leaders as well. But I think, just based on the research that I've done and the way that I run my teams, what I've experienced to be successful is to assume that people are well-intentioned, that they're passionate, that they're motivated, and to reward that and to encourage that and to create circumstances for them to succeed and thrive, and to not be that manager breathing down their neck. that works for some environments. That works for places like the military where you need that. I understand that you need to have that sort of rigid management style in the military. But if you're running a tech startup, no. And then right after that TEDx talk, I did another one on the burnout gamble. So before I wrote the book, I encapsulated this. I told this story as a TEDx talk.
Yeah.
And that talk was so well received that it encouraged me to go and do further research. And as I went down the rabbit hole, I found the research and the stories necessary to compile a book.
That's really, really cool. You're spot on with everything you're saying. Management versus, you say, leadership.
Leadership, yeah.
Yes, it's even in the
Not always
military
the same
today. Yeah, absolutely, not always the same thing. And you're right. Like in the military, to a certain degree, there has to be that extra fire. But I'll tell you right now, the new generation, and this is my opinion, so I know everybody's gonna come down on me like, I can't believe you said that. But the younger generation in the military, more so than the older generation, they ask why now, and you can't
Really?
get away with just saying because. And what my argument is, okay, it's all about the timing. So before you put them in harm's way, tell them why. Don't just say because the young military member now, and myself included in that, they want to know, what are we doing? Why are we doing this?
Yeah.
And then once you do it, I'll go to hell and back. But it doesn't work to just say, do it.
It's interesting you say that, man, because that was also a point of contention, like a decision that factored into why I didn't go full time with the military. Is because at the time, like I think we were just coming out of Afghanistan, going into Iraq,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't have the answers to those questions. Again, like you, I would have gone to hell and back. I just needed to know and understand the motivations a little bit more. But that was a really strange time in the world's history. Both America and Canada
Yeah.
were just trying to figure things out, and I think now we have a lot more clarity when it comes to why we do what we do. But back then we were dealing with a new warfare.
Right.
We were dealing with an enemy that we couldn't see, that wasn't wearing a uniform, that wasn't showing up to a battlefield at a prescribed time. So this was I totally understand the circumstances. You reminded me of a quote, and I talked about it in my first TEDx talk, and I'm going to butcher it, but I'll try anyways. It says that if you want to convince people to build a ship, don't assign them tasks and give them wood. Instead, convince them to long for the endlessness of the ocean.
Awesome.
And that's
I don't
what it
think
is.
you
If you
butchered it
help
at
people
all.
connect with the why, if you help people understand, like, even in the military, what you're doing over here is you're ensuring that the people that you love and care about can sleep peacefully at night without the threat of nuclear war, so on and so forth. That's worth fighting for. That's worth dying for versus, hey, go over here to this and, run this strike or run this mission or this recon patrol. And, it's connecting them beyond the task. It's connecting the task to something greater.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I'm just curious, what was some of the biggest differentiators between leadership and management for you?
Yeah, so the biggest differences between leadership and management, managers typically are, how do I say this? A manager will sit behind and tell their team to go forward.
Mm-hmm.
A leader will be at the front of the pack saying, I'm going in, are you coming with me? And so it's different. Leaders lead by example. They're in the trenches. They're doing the work alongside their people. They don't see their people as employees or dispensable or grunts. They see them as human beings that have their own passions, their motivations, their emotions. They try to understand them at an emotional level and to satisfy that as a way to work. They're interested in development. They're not seeing, again, those people as expendable, so to speak. And I think really it just comes down to being driven by values more than anything else. And I think when you think about managers, when you think about management, at least the traditional definition of it, that came from a time, around the Industrial Revolution, is where the concept of management was formalized. You needed people to keep unmotivated people going at the factory lines, and that's not the case anymore. When people are finding work and they want, like you said, for that why to be answered, for there to be passion associated with their work, it requires a different kind of contract. It requires a different social contract, one that isn't having a manager breathe down your neck and giving you marching orders, one that is also, or somebody inspiring you.
Definitely. Yeah, you have hit it right on the head, and that's exactly like influence, treating them as people, knowing that you care, and that you are you're in it with them. Like there's some danger that you're sharing, um, as well in the fight, whether that's military or civilian. And
Yeah.
our psychology is alike. Like it doesn't matter at the end
I'll
of the
never
day.
forget this, man. Like there's leaders within management scenarios too. So one of my first sergeants in basic military qualification here was a guy by the name of Sergeant O'Neill, and I'll never forget this guy. The most One of the most terrifying people I've ever met, as sergeants typically are
Yeah.
during Shark Week. But this guy, over time, I saw that what he was doing is he cared so much. Like he would get right there with you. Like if I was experiencing a jam in my gun, he would lie down prone right beside me, take the gun, show me how to do it, and he would continue to show me how to do it
Yeah.
until I actually got it. Now multiply this by 100 recruits. I mean, this is a guy who was in it. He wasn't just standing on top of us barking orders. Like this guy was modeling behavior for us both while we were working and both while we were training, but even afterwards as well. Like when we had downtime, he'd come and sit down and talk to us and get to know us on an individual level. And that was really special to me because that made me not only fear him, which is sometimes what the relationship is with managers, but I also came to respect him.
Phenomenal. Now I know that TEDx talk as well is a must see and listen. And
Thank you.
I will make sure my personal circle sees that. Wow.
Thank you.
We're gonna have to make sure we continue to keep in touch because I know that these conversations, like, they could easily last for hours.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll make sure that happens. So I have a question for you as far as mentorship being about mentorship. If someone said, Hamza, look, I love everything you're doing. You're so accomplished, and they're swooning, and they're like, oh my gosh, you're so amazing. And they want to know, how in the world can I get your attention? And if I wanted you to be my mentor, how can I make that happen? Like, what are your expectations for that relationship?
The answer for me, until it's going to be humanly impossible to do so, is always yes. I'm always in awe of, I'm a big movie junkie, so I follow a lot of celebrity news and I watch videos and interviews and whatnot. And it's very clear to see who's really in it for the right reasons. I don't know why this person is just coming to mind. Charlie Sheen, of all people. If you watch any video of Charlie Sheen on YouTube talking to fans, it's remarkable. I mean, it's not like Charlie Sheen has a lot going on right now, but this is a guy that if you stop him in the middle of the street and you talk to him, he will talk to you for hours. I mean, if he's at an airport, he will sign all of your cards and he will talk to you and get to know you. Recently, I can't remember who it was, but I think it was in the WWE. So there was a star, Sasha Banks, who's in the female division. She was talking about, I think it was her, talking about how at 6 a.m. in the morning she doesn't want to talk to people in the airport.
Yeah.
And all wrestlers were tweeting at her saying, you're in this business for the wrong reason. I mean, the fans are the reason why you're here. And I think about that all the time because I wouldn't be where I am today if people didn't take time out of their schedule, if they didn't take the time, the energy, the attention to help me get to where I am right now. I think Kevin Spacey said it best. He said that if you've been privileged enough to experience success, you have a responsibility to send the elevator back down. So to answer your question succinctly, if anybody reaches out to me on Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, email, I'm not hard to find. Reach out to me and just ask. Say, Hamza, here's what I'm up to. I want your advice on this. It doesn't have to be a formal mentor relationship. It could just be that open line of communication for us to talk and me to answer questions. And I promise I'll do whatever I can to get back to you within 24 hours. And anybody who's in my circle of influence, anybody who has received mentorship from me can tell you the same, that, my only objective over here is to help as many people as possible experience and have the same opportunities that I've had.
There you go. If you want Hamza as your mentor, you need to reach out today.
That's it. Simple as that, man.
I know everybody's starting to type right now, so if you start
Oh, there we go.
starts going off. I love that. Like, that's exactly it. And our catchphrase is leave a legacy. That's our mantra. That's our motto. And I can tell, just, you emanate like passion. You are
Thank you.
the type of person that your energy is just there. It's apparent, and I know it's genuine, 100%. And
Thank you.
anyone watching this, anyone observing you, they're gonna know the same. So if you're not reaching out to, I'm just gonna say it because I know you might not say it. If you're not reaching out to Hamza, you're absolutely losing one of the biggest opportunities you can to
Wow.
know someone who truly cares about you. And you're gonna. I'm already learning a lot just sitting down, listening to you. I feel like I know a lot about leadership and management, but when I hear it articulated from you, I'm like, wow, I didn't think of it that way, or that was well said. And so you can learn something from someone, no matter what. Just sitting there and listening to how they speak and how they articulate what they're talking about.
Thank you, man. That means a lot.
So just curious, and if mentorship didn't play a role growing up, you can tell us that as well. But did mentorship play a role in shaping the person you are today, or was there a lack of it growing up?
It absolutely did, and I often think about what my life would have looked like had there not been mentorship in it. Because I didn't grow up in the most ideal of circumstances, so I'm a first generation student. My parents immigrated from Mumbai, India. They didn't have a lot in the way of resources or networks even.
No.
And so I spent most of my early informative years in priority neighborhoods here in Canada. There was problems all around me in my neighborhood, in my community, mental health, violence, drugs, gangs. And so it would have been very easy for me without positive role models and without mentors to not see past my circumstances. So that was really important for me when I was a youth, growing up, to be able to have a vision, to cultivate a vision, to invest in leadership values, and to work to improve my circumstances. And then once I began working in the corporate field, and I did a lot of work at universities and colleges, there is when I started to cultivate what I call now my personal board of directors. And we do this for businesses all the time.
Yes.
Businesses have boards of directors, but as individuals, when people don't think of themselves as an enterprise, and you should think of yourself as an enterprise. In fact, you are probably the most important business you're ever going to work on. So I have about 20 board of directors in my life. I don't pay them, but I guess if you call like lunch and dinners and coffees, remuneration for their work, sure.
Yeah.
So I have these people, and I meet them at least once a year. At least once a year. I try for once every 4 months, at least twice a year, once a year. And I meet with them, and those are unique opportunities for me to be criticized. And criticized not coming from a place of malice or ill intent. It's actually criticism that is unabashed, that is honest, and it's because these people care about me. They care about my growth. They're from different milestones in my life, whether I was in high school, to my last job, to when I was teaching, to when I was a student. There's people that represent different milestones in my life who have seen me, have watched my progress, watched me stumble, watched me fall, and have been there to guide me at every step of the way. So anytime I'm faced with a critical decision, I run it by my mentor circle. Anytime that I'm experiencing a low, I run it by them. Anytime I want introductions or I want to unlock a new version of success, this mentor circle is here for me. And I would encourage all the listeners of the podcast to do the same, to find those, 5, 10, 15, 20 people in your life and build them up around you. And make sure that these are people who are not afraid to tell you when you're messing up. Because I think the worst mistake you can make with a mentor is to find somebody that agrees with you all the time. A true mentor will kick your ass, for lack of a better phrase.
I love it. And you're gonna make me bring out one of my favorite quotes, which I think I bring it up almost every podcast. But you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. Jim Rohn.
I love that one, man.
And you spend time with 20 amazing people at least once a year. That's why you're like, holy moly.
I try, man, but it comes from a time where I actually did the opposite of that, where there was a time in my life when you're experiencing Superman syndrome and you think that you're invincible and you can't make any mistakes, where I decided to push my friends away, push the mentors away, and I found a circle of friends that was actually leading me down a pretty dark path. And that's when I was experiencing some of my peak burnout as well. So yeah, that quote is so important. I love that one. I need to revisit that one again and really think about not just who I'm surrounding myself with in person, but I think what you said earlier about reading the books, and being so very careful about that media diet. That's so critical, and I think that we should be just as critical about the friends that we have online. And when you scroll through your newsfeed, whether on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, that is also at a very subconscious level influencing your thoughts and your attitude. So I need to give some extra thought to what's coming on my online social sphere.
It's true. I used to listen to some music, and it's very catchy, awesome, definitely could tap your toes to. But when I started realizing it was really sad music, you know, and my mood was
Which
also
artist was
lit.
this, man?
Uh, I'm probably gonna butcher it. It was like I'm Mr. Lonely. Akon.
Oh, yeah, Akon,
Akon.
Akon, yeah.
That song is sad, man.
It's a really sad song.
Yeah, when you're thinking about it, I'm
Catchy
like, oh, but I would listen to other music that was kind of like that too, you know, the hip hop genre, some country
Sure.
music, but like a good amount of it, when I really started listening to the words, and kind of like you were saying with the books, when you really listen to the words, you're like, this is actually not uplifting, and I've been listening to this, so I changed, like intentionally listening to music that had uplifting lyrics with the beat, and I'm telling you right now, I felt even better. So the same thing goes with books that it does with music.
That's really important, and I think if I could dedicate myself to study anything, it would be just that, understanding how our media diet is just as important, if not more important, than our physical, our food diet. Because we just monitor what goes inside your stomachs and what goes into your body, but what about what goes into your brain? What about what goes into your heart?
Huge. That's every single day.
Yeah,
That's you. This doesn't stop. You go to sleep. It kind of it rest. But what are you doing? Either you're dreaming, or maybe you're in a state where you're not necessarily thinking conscious thoughts, but your subconscious
absolutely,
is still going. So
absolutely,
what are you
absolutely.
feeding that? Oh, see,
Yeah.
look, we could go.
Oh, dude,
We
this
could
this could
definitely
easily
talk
be
about
like a
that.
2-3 hour podcast, man, if we're not careful.
You're about to come out with another book just through this
You know what? I've
conversation.
been thinking about it, but I first gotta do a second revision on this one. So when you buy the book, you're gonna notice a couple of spelling and grammar mistakes. Unfortunately, I
Ah,
self-published it and I tried my very best to get it out
oh,
there in a
that's
timely
huge.
fashion. So
Yeah,
I'm working on the revised version of it, and go ahead, get this version. But I promise you, I'll sign a copy of the revised version and personally bring it to you, and we can do episode 2, 3, 4 over there, man.
I will buy that one too.
Thank you, man. You're too kind.
Absolutely. No, that's huge. And for me, um, I I'm trying to be careful how the grammar and stuff like that. I worry about the message more. So like already just talking to you, and I'm excited about the message that your book has. So
Thank you.
the other people who are like, oh, I need the revised version. They're gonna be excited about that. But I need the book now, so I'm gonna get it as soon as I can possibly get my hands on it.
Amazing, man.
And now we're talking about books. So I'm gonna ask you, what is a key resource that you use that contributes to your success, whether it be an app, a book, anything.
Can I say two of them real quick?
Absolutely.
Audible by Amazon, which is audiobooks, and podcasts. I have found both of these to be just such a great form of professional development that can happen at in a very convenient way.
Right.
So whether you're on the treadmill, running, working out, I talk about converting your downtime into uptime. And so sometimes when you're trying to relax or trying to, make the most of a commute in the morning, you're on the bus, you're on the train, you have a tendency to want to listen to music or do something to distract yourself. But why not use that time to fill your mind, fill your heart with some positive, and educational, informative, and even amusing content. So I listen to a lot of audiobooks and I listen to a lot of podcasts.
Yeah.
I find them to be really effective and very affordable ways to skill up.
Definitely. I've got a podcast like maybe 2 years ago, because I used to, honestly, I thought podcasts were like for old people.
Same,
If I'm
man.
gonna be
Same.
completely honest.
I was at a conference, a social media conference, I think 2013.
Yeah.
Actually, even before then, where somebody got up on stage and said podcasts are making a comeback, and I remember laughing. I was like, "Who is this guy? What are you talking about? Podcasts
Yeah.
making a comeback?" And now here I am. I recently bought mic equipment, and I'm starting to workshop some ideas. And
Yes.
here we are sitting down today, and I'm going to encourage all my friends, all my family, to download the episode, to subscribe to the podcast, and spread the word about this. Because what you're doing over here, this conversation is something that I think you found a brilliant way to share conversations that I imagine you have in your daily life all the time.
All the time.
But now you
Absolutely.
found a way to record that, to create content, to broadcast it, and hopefully that'll encourage people to go visit your website, to follow you online, and continue that learning and improve their media diet.
Right. I get to talk to my immediate family, and I think they're great. And what this allows me to do is talk to brilliant people like you through social media, and you're in Canada.
Yeah.
Like when I'm not gonna run into you in the mall here in
know.
North Carolina. Like it's not gonna happen. But through an Instagram feed, I was like, whoa, Hamza's doing some incredible things, and I would love to share his story with my audience. And through the internet, through social media, here we are.
Thank you, man. That's
phenomenal.
awesome.
I'm gonna go deeper, and especially
do it.
your
These are
family
great
and friends
questions,
are gonna
by
be
the
like,
way.
"What's
Wow.
going on?" Oh yeah, and these questions are always when people are working on things like us, when they're entrepreneurs, they're always gonna be something that another person can take away from it. And with that, what is the biggest obstacle that you've ever had to face? And if you were helped with a mentor, let us know. And if not, let us know how that could have helped you.
I think the biggest obstacle I've ever had to face, and it hasn't gone away, it's just become smaller. It's become more feeble, and I think I've become more adept at dealing with it. But it's imposter syndrome, which is this feeling that you're never good enough, that you walk into a room and that everyone's going to find out that you're not good enough, that you're a phony, that you're a fake. And where that comes from is it comes from not feeling like you're enough. And I struggle with that for a multitude of reasons. I struggle with it as a person of color. I struggle with it as somebody who grew up in a low socioeconomic household, somebody who's had mental health challenges around me my entire life. It's somebody who's growing up in this particular time in history where you have, a president who is saying things like, we're going to build a wall and we're going to keep your family from coming into our country because we think that everyone who lives in that country is a terrorist. And, it's overwhelming right now what the world is experiencing, people who don't have privilege, what they're experiencing. And so my entire life, 30 years of going through that and walking into a room and feeling like people are looking at me and they're judging me. It happens to me all the time. Whenever I speak at a conference, sometimes, 1 out of every 3 conferences, somebody will come up to me afterwards and say something, that they think is really helpful and encouraging, but they're not reading between the lines. They say things like, Hamza, I'm surprised at how articulate you were.
Oh, wow.
And I'm like, why is that surprising? Why
so
did you assume that because of how I look and my name and the beard that I wouldn't be articulate? Like, come on.
Oh my gosh.
They mean well, but that's the problem. I've been dealing with this my whole life. I'll never forget the first time I was invited to sit on a board for an organization. And I sat on the board. Mm-hmm. I sat at the board, and I was brought because of my social media marketing expertise. Mm-hmm. But I remember looking around the table, and the only thought I had was, wow, they needed to meet a diversity quota.
Mouth dropped. Wow.
Right? And that wasn't the case. I remember my mentor telling me afterwards, is like, no, the reason why you're here is because you're good at what you do. So that's been the biggest obstacle, Levante. It's been dealing with that nagging voice over my shoulder, which is really just my own insecurity saying, you're not good enough, go away, like, do something else. This room isn't for you. You don't deserve to be here. You don't deserve to have a podcast. You don't deserve to have a company. You don't deserve to publish a book. They're going to find out. This book is terrible. This book is full of spelling mistakes and grammar mistakes. And so...
Wow, dude's mean on your shoulder.
It's mean. Yeah. It's like Smeagol from Lord of the Rings. Yeah. That little two-faced gremlin creature that's just like. So I've learned over time, and my mentors have instilled positive self-talk, positive reinforcement, gratitude, celebrating your victories, celebrating often. They've reassured me that I can tell this imposter syndrome to sit in the corner when it's time to, when it's game time essentially, and to not let it get in the way. Acknowledge that it's always going to be there because of, again, just who I am and my experiences, but to not let it manage me. I need to manage it and not let it manage me.
No, that's absolutely huge, and I suffer from the same thing. It's funny how both you and me, who are trying to do big things, we both suffer from imposter syndrome. And
yeah, man. I'm sure when you started this podcast, you had people in your life who doubted you. Who said that, what are you doing over here? You're going to spend all this time recording people and, publishing it on the web. Who's going to download it? Who's going to listen to it? And joke's on them. Here you are, right?
Still doing it. It's
hey.
it's still happening. They're like, oh, what's that little Facebook thing you did? And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, it's kind of a company that I'm building, but we won't talk about that. And that's the thing. So they're going to see you, Hamza, and already first of all, your bio is already ridiculously impressive, but they're gonna turn around one day and they're gonna be like, hold on, that's what you were doing? Like, I didn't even realize. They're like, why didn't you tell me? Or they're gonna say, oh, you were just lucky. Okay, no, those 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years were not luck. They were hard work, dedication that led to your success. There was maybe some luck in the some of the opportunities, and that only is made possible though through hard work.
And dude, this is going to pay off for you if it isn't already paying off. You're going to do well by doing good. And by you taking out this time and investing in sharing these stories and curating these stories, like you are putting so much value into the world where it's going to be here long after you leave the planet.
Yeah.
Like these stories, these episodes, they're going to live on forever. So you've effectively immortalized yourself just by virtue of having this conversation, which is no small feat, man.
Hopefully the aliens don't find my voice, because then they will.
Dude, I would rather they find this versus anything that Kylie Kardashian is doing right now.
Oh, so. Yes. That's true. Actually, they definitely...
I think, if aliens have come to visit us, just hypothetically, I think they would have just turned the UFOs around and been like, yo, this is not the planet we want to
Not worth it, wrong
These guys are killing themselves here. Look at who they got as president and nuclear war, and, Kylie Kardashian has a lip gloss line, and, they're just like, nope, no interest here.
Things are pretty crazy. All right, let's see. What's a? I mean, you've already given us pretty cool quotes already, but I'm gonna ask again if there's like a bigger one that you use in your hardest times. Maybe it's a mantra. Maybe it's a memory that you use to keep your passion on fire, especially when things don't seem to be going right.
Man, I think I'm gonna get in trouble for saying this quote, but I've been inspired recently by what's been happening in the States, man. Obviously, this was a really interesting weekend in football. Everyone's been talking about Colin Kaepernick and take a knee, and it reminds me of a poem that I studied at University of Toronto, which it's called "The Second Coming" by Yeats. Yates, I think I'm saying that wrong, but one of the lines that just keeps on presenting itself in different scenarios is the best lack all conviction, and the worst are full of passionate intensity. Let me repeat that again. The best lack all conviction, and the worst are full of passionate intensity. Mm-hmm. And I think about that in the context of what happened just this weekend as like a perfect convergence point between ideologies.
Yeah.
Here you have this one guy that's been blackballed by football, by the NFL, who's inspired the entire sport, who's inspired, artists and musicians and politicians and people around the world to take a knee, whether they're not on the field, but to do so in different ways, to put their foot down and say that there's injustice happening, it needs to be addressed in a peaceful way. And then on the other hand, you've got somebody that takes to Twitter at 3 a.m. and is denigrating and is making fun and insulting people like him, and taking it a step further and going ahead and insulting the guy's mother. And so I'm thinking to myself, wow, this is an example of the worst full of passionate intensity. Mm-hmm. And so I've been thinking about myself, I want to make a change. I want to improve the world. I want to help people who are underprivileged. What am I doing? I lack the conviction to do something beyond improving my own circumstances. And so I've been thinking about that a lot. And it's been motivating me to get up and strive for more than what I have right now, because I think I've done well for myself. I've been able to build a business, multiple businesses, create a revenue stream, multiple revenue streams, investments to enjoy life to a certain extent. But that's not enough. That can't be enough. This can't be life. Me having fun, enjoying myself is selfish. It's selfish. It's irresponsible. It's a terrible use of my time on the planet. So I'm thinking about people like you who are creating podcasts and spreading positivity and encouraging others to improve their circumstances. I'm asking myself every single day, what can I do? So I'm looking into things like, I registered a nonprofit at the top of the year called Resilient 100, and I'm now thinking about ways that I can activate it and use that to build resilience capacity and change leaders. I'm looking at where the profits from my businesses go. I'm looking at how I'm spending my time, how much of it is spent volunteering and providing mentorship. So I've been very inspired by what's been happening in the States, by Colin Kaepernick, but that quote specifically keeps me focused on what needs to happen over the next couple of years, which is we need to be full of passion and intensity just as much as, they are.
100%. 100%. And if we're not, then that voice will be the only voice that's heard.
Absolutely,
We have to be
absolutely.
louder. We have to be, and
This
when I say louder, not necessarily verbally. Like you're saying, through your action speaks volumes.
Somebody earlier today, when I talked about politics, she said to me, I don't want to talk about politics right now. And I'm thinking to myself, wow, I don't have the privilege of not talking about politics. Politics is
Yeah.
all I can talk about. It's my daily life. I walk into an airport, it's politics. I
No.
walk into a restaurant, it's politics. I'm sitting at home, it's politics. We're at a turning point in history where if we're not exactly what you said, man, we don't have the luxury of not being vocal now. It's this is the fourth quarter, like the last few minutes left in the fourth quarter.
No. We got to get in the game.
Hey,
It's time to go. Suit up. No more.
Hey.
No more on the bench.
put me in, coach.
And you're already in, man. Like you're saying you're taking those out. You're already doing it.
But the question I have though, man, is like, am I doing enough? Because you look at a guy like Colin, who could have arguably had a very successful career
Yeah.
in the NFL. It's not like he was on the downturn. I mean, some people would argue that he was falling off as a player, but the truth is, you look at his stats. He could have been on any team and been an invaluable contributor.
Mm-hmm.
Do I have the same conviction that he has to sacrifice, to make that same kind of sacrifice in my own way? To make a change. And I think you are. I mean, you're making the ultimate sacrifice over here. You're putting your life on the line. Like you have said, hey, like here's Levante, and I've decided to join the armed forces over here to literally give up the only thing that I have that is the most precious resource on the planet, which is my time, my energy, my attention, but beyond that, your life. And you're making a change in every single interaction you have. Like people that you talk to have positive associations of the different intersecting identities that you bring to the military because of who you are and your character and the work that you're doing. So I'm thinking more and more about how I can do things that are as impactful as you're doing right now, as Colin's doing. What's the impact that I'm going to make? How am I going to leave the world in a better place than in which I found it?
It's huge. I can't argue against that. I think you're already the fact that you're thinking about that like gives me chills. It automatically excites me because it's as long as people are thinking about it, as long as you're thinking about that, Hamza. Like, and I continue to do that. And you're painting the podcast in a different light than I've even seen it up to this point because it was yes I got to have really cool conversations and I continue to meet awesome people like you, but I didn't see it the same way you did, and so I think that's pretty cool that that perspective is out there. But the fact that you're thinking about that is already the first step, and now the next step is both of us as we go forward. Like we'll continue. You're one of the 5 people in my circle.
Amen. Wow, dude, that means a lot.
And we'll continue to talk and say, hey, what are you doing right now? Hey,
Yeah.
this is what I'm doing. Okay, how can we collaborate? All right, let's go
I love
forward.
it.
Because now we have a force in Canada. Now we have a force in the United States. And
Hey.
as long as our voices are loud enough, which I know they will be, that's two territories that are completely covered with positivity that can rule out everything else. And through social media especially, there's no boundary. There's absolutely no boundary anymore.
Dude, you made my day. That's my heart is full. Thank you.
Let's do this. We're ready. This is going to be the starting point. We're going to look back and say this is where the relationship started, through a conversation on a podcast, when we're on a stage or we're at an event or something like that, and I'll have to play this clip. Absolutely.
Thank you.
We have arrived at the last part of the podcast. It's pretty crazy. Like,
Wow.
the conversation could absolutely go forever, and I definitely am going to be reaching out to you as time goes on and just checking in with you and seeing what you're up to.
Likewise.
Man, I'm like looking at the time. I'm like that went really fast. Torch Holders, we've arrived at the time in our program where our guest has 1 minute to pass the torch and leave a legacy. We all know a mentor is a person who has achieved a level of success that we desire and can effectively guide us to success as well. Based on the success you, Hamza, have achieved at this point in your life, if you could pass a torch and leave a legacy message to your former self or anyone in a similar situation, how would you pass the torch in 1 hot minute?
That's an amazing question. In a one hot minute, I would say respect yourself, respect your body, respect your mind. Understand that you are a vehicle, that you're a vessel, and that you're here on this planet to do something. But you have to understand that the vehicle that which you're interacting and interfacing with the world through is this. It's your head, it's your heart, it's your limbs. And be kind to yourself. Get sleep, drink water, eat good food, exercise. And more importantly, understand when enough is enough. I think most people, especially young folks that are experiencing all of the different demands on them right now, competition, alienation, society, technology, loneliness, the economy, define when work ends. Know when to stop working, because if left to your own devices, as I mentioned earlier, Parkinson's law, work expands so as to fill the time allocated for its completion. There is diminishing returns for being an overachiever. I would much rather you be a high performer, you be somebody that has a sustainable definition of success, and that you experience success not as much as you would in a short burst as an overachiever, but it's a long game. Like you're on this planet, according to most statistics, for 80 years on average. So make sure that you get the most out of that time. Make sure that you arrive at your destination safely, and remember that people always say it's not the years in your life, it's the life in your years. But why can't you have both?
Wow. That's all I can say about that. Wow. That's it. And we can have both. You got to go after it. That was Levante Santos and Hamza Khan reminding you to seek knowledge and pass the torch.